Alrighty, here we are, and it's time to get started. One of the things that you'll commonly hear said from someone who has a lot of experience or years in a particular field will be, I feel like I know nothing. There's that moment in your career, whether it's 8 years in, 12, 15, 20, where you just all of a sudden hit this wall. You hit this moment where you feel so overwhelmed and you feel like an idiot and you feel like you know nothing. And then we know that there's the other side of the fence where we have people who are young in their careers who feel like they know everything. Now, a lot of people are instantly going to say, oh, that's the Dunning-Kruger effect from psychology. And they'll say that's where people tend to overestimate how much they actually know and have experience in a particular subject. And while there is truth to that, and I think a lot of people can take some valuable lessons and insight from that effect, I don't want to get too much into the weeds because it was only one study. I don't believe they've tried replicating it, and it's not exactly what I think is going on when it comes to this like moment of why do people who are really experienced, really wise, and really educated often feel like I don't feel like I know anything. And why is it that people who actually aren't that experienced tend to feel like they know more? And it has a lot to do with exposure and awareness. So I'm going to try to use a visual example really quick to help explain that. So let's take someone with maybe like 3 years experience in the field, because that's most of the time when people run into danger is when you're 3 to 5 years in, because you're not like that first year rookie, you're not that second year sophomore. You have a couple years under your belt and you start to turn into the know-it-all, right? So let's say this is the person who has 3 to 5 years experience, right, in their field. Well, we know that when we're in our field, we tend to read books, we tend to listen to podcasts, we tend to go to workshops, summits, certifications. We do all that. So what we're doing is we're putting out these little radars, which is almost like an awareness antenna, right? And this awareness antenna kind of goes out into the ether, and it's where we get exposed to information, right? So I'm going to try to draw that as quickly as I can. So you start getting exposed to different thought process, philosophies, people in your field, podcasts, books, research studies, and you start getting exposed. You start getting taught, right? You start learning from one mentor, oh, that's actually wrong, this is right. And then you learn from another mentor, no, that's wrong, and this is right. And you start going through that process that we've all gone through. And what's happening is you're getting exposed to different thought processes, philosophies, everything, right? And so basically I want you to think of these like little awareness antennas. So this is what the person knows, right? This is what they know. And they're getting exposed to, we'll put this in red, so getting exposed to what they don't know. And I know this is not a perfect illustration, right? And then if we take this is what they actually, right? This is actually all the information out there that's exponentially huge, right? We will never know everything, especially when it comes to like the human body. So this is what they know, right? And they start putting these, right, through experiences, through books, through all that, they start exposing themselves to more. And so they then, but because they don't know that much, right, their knowledge is so small and their wisdom is even smaller, right? Because wisdom is the application of truth. Knowledge is the simulation of truth or the gathering. So, right, so when it comes to all this, since they don't know that much and they don't have that much wisdom and experience, when they put out their exposure antennas, when they're getting exposed to stuff, they feel like they know it all, right? Because they actually haven't been exposed to how they're not even aware, right? Their awareness antennas don't even know that this all exists. It's not even registering. So, in a way, when they are online, when they're creating content, when they're getting in arguments, when they're fighting with their coworkers, when they're doing whatever, they feel and are feeling justified and they go on crusades against people. And it's because they have this grasp and they have this where almost all their knowledge and wisdom and experience is within reach, right? And so we've all been there. I was an absolute tyrant, and I went on so many crusades in the comment sections when I was a young trainer. When I was a young trainer in I'll say years 3, 4, 5 are where you've really got to watch out. And the crazy thing is we're not aware, right? That's where the Dunning-Kruger effect comes in, is most people, like I said, have poor awareness and they don't know what they don't know, right? And so now here's what I want you to think. Why does the person with so much experience often feel that almost like imposter syndrome? Like, man, I don't feel like I'm right. We all run into those moments. If people don't, they're lying, right? We all have those internally. Sometimes they're expressed externally. But here's what I want you to think. Now let's take this bigger circle, and let's say this is a person with, let's say, like 20 years experience. Well, this person with 20 years experience does know way more than this person with 3, because they've obviously had the time, right? They've had all the failures, they've had all the experiences, they've had all the opportunities. But now here's what I want you to think. This person knows all this, so they do know a lot, they have experienced a lot, they have gained a lot of wisdom. But the problem is, as we know, the more you know, the more you know you don't know, and the more you're aware of all the stuff that you still don't know. So what I mean is, now I want you to think our awareness antennas that are out into the world, out into books, out into, right? We have so many more, meaning we're aware of all the stuff that we perhaps don't know, don't have the answers to, or don't have a good answer to. And so now this person, even though they have so much experience, so much knowledge, they often don't feel it. And that's when the imposter syndrome comes in. And I've experienced it, you've experienced it. You're getting ready to go on a podcast and talk about something that you have 18 years experience doing, and all of a sudden you have this moment where you feel like and it's not because you don't, it's actually because you have, like I said, you've been exposed to so much that you have an awareness, right, of all the things that are still out there that are yet to be answered or discovered, or right, or just anything like that, versus the person down here actually believes, right, but they have no clue that all this other stuff exists. And that's why sometimes, conversations are good, disagreements are great, and debates are even better. And especially if it helps both sides of the fence either come to a new conclusion or defend their current one. But the problem is if this person with 20 years sometimes tries to say something to this person, it's almost like it can't even register, because they might be talking about a concept that's here, right? But that person is 6 years away from being able to understand the logic, reasoning, and wisdom behind what that means. Even though technically they're going to take their sphere of knowledge and try to reason and try to create logical sense, or try to create logical arguments for and against, or whatever, whether they're like a fanboy of that particular method, or they're like, I'm going to destroy this method. So, and that's what's happening all the time on the internet. So it's hard, and especially as you get to where you've gathered knowledge, right? And knowledge, like I said, the goal is not more knowledge, because knowledge is, you need wisdom to apply knowledge, right? That's the application of truth. Right? People just think, especially nowadays, and we even have a step further back where people are getting, a lot of people are gaining more information, but information is not necessarily truth, right? So knowledge is the simulation or gathering of truth, but information is not necessarily the gathering of truth. It's the gathering of, I don't even want to call it facts. It's just the gathering of like things, right? It's the gathering of info, which is so funny, right? So when people are scrolling, they're not necessarily even gathering knowledge. A lot of times, depending, right? And this is why people are so confused, because if I just gather information, well, the first thing people are going to say is, what's truth, right? And once that's hard enough as it is, because every every hour there's 250,000 new posts. So our goal, like I said, through time and experience is to assimilate more truth, but then not just to harbor truth for ourselves, but to apply it to serve other people and to use our gifts and callings and talents to apply wisdom. And wisdom, like I said, once again, is the ultimate goal. And that's what I want you guys to think. So, but if I think this is a fun example, because as you go through, you're going to go through like cycles of this throughout your career. You're going to get to the point where you start to feel like you've got a good grasp on things, and then all of a sudden you hear a podcast or someone talk and it feels like everything crumbles. And that's not the truth. All that's happened is you've been exposed to a new layer, almost like rings of a tree or rings of sequoia. This is a never-ending process, right? The thing you've got to understand is you never want to stop learning, right? But you have to understand that you're going to die before you figure it all out. In fact, you're going to die before you figure out most of it. And so at some point, you've got to trust your gut. You've got to trust your instinct. You just got to make a decision. You got to start doing, right? Because at the end of the day, you are going to have 10 of your favorite experts say this is truth. And then you're going to have 10 of your favorite experts say, no, this is truth. And like I said, that's where it takes actually the doing and the trial and error and the successes and the failures and the failures and the failures and the more failures and the more failures and more failures to start to be able to apply truth and to apply it effectively and to get results with that truth, right? And there's no perfect here, right? So it's important to never stop learning, but the more you learn, the more you'll hopefully know, and then the more you know, the more you can apply, and then the more you can apply, right? And then learn the lessons of the application of wisdom, right? If you apply it appropriately or inappropriately, and most of the time we apply it inappropriately, and then we're able to further down the road make those corrections. But what I want you to think is, as much as we want to just keep expanding out knowledge, right? It's important to realize that we've got to turn that knowledge into wisdom. If not, we're in trouble. So the Dunning-Kruger effect was, like I said, I think that there's been some counter points and debates made against how valid is the Dunning-Kruger effect, which basically states that, people without much experience or knowledge in a particular area tend to overestimate. I think a better example is showing that people with little experience just are unaware of all the things they're unaware of, and the person with a lot of experience is been exposed to so much more. And so if you're feeling overwhelmed, this is just a little bit of encouragement to say, I get it. Like, it's tough. And this is never ending. And that is just, I just thought it'd be fun to come on and put out this little example. So I hope this was helpful. If you liked the video, drop a like. If you got any questions, drop a comment. If not, I will see you guys in the next one.